Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news, baby. Coming up, Michael Bastasch is with us from the Daily Caller News Foundation. We'll talk about the future for American energy now that President Trump is on the way back and what Joe Biden is attempting to do before that happens. Senator Tommy Tuberville will be with us today. That's at 4 o'clock. We'll talk to Coach Tuberville about those election results and the big Senate leadership race that's ahead. Who is going to run the United States Senate? We'll talk to Tommy Tuberville about it, Coach Tuberville. Julie Kelly joins us at 4:30 today as Jack Smith tries to wrap up his election meddling operation. And Kurt Schlichter is here at 5 o'clock. You can join us at 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Always grateful to have your calls. Before we came to air today, the New York Times has a new interview up with Nancy Pelosi, and in case you're wondering what was going on behind the scenes when they replaced Joe Biden with Kamala Harris like that back in July, the New York Times has a headline up right now: Pelosi laments Biden's late exit and the lack of an open primary. Ooh, Kamala was not good, and she's willing to say it now, because the stakes are so much lower. They lost. There's nothing to be worried about anymore. But now she can start telling the truth about all of this. Representative Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, suggested this week it would have been better for the Democratic Party if President Biden had abandoned his re-election campaign sooner, of course, and the party had then held a competitive primary process to replace him. So she's blaming him. He should have gotten out sooner. In an interview on Thursday with the New York Times, Ms. Pelosi said what was widely reported around the time Mr. Biden dropped out, that she believed it was implicitly understood that his exit would be followed by an internal party competition for a new nominee, instead of an anointment of Vice President Kamala Harris. Quote, had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race, said Pelosi to the New York Times. She added during the interview, which will be published in full this weekend. I guess it's an audio format. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary. Ms. Pelosi went on, quote, and as I say, Kamala may have, I think she would have done well in that and been stronger going forward. No, she doesn't. She's lying to the New York Times. She doesn't think Kamala Harris would have done well in an open primary process because she knows what it looks like when Kamala Harris participates in an open primary process. That happened in 2019. Kamala Harris collapsed before she got to California. But we don't know that, she says. That didn't happen. We live with what happened. And because the president endorsed Kamala Harris immediately, that really made it almost impossible to have a primary at that time. If it had been much earlier, it would have been different, she says. I want to take you back to that time frame. It was the Sunday, July 21st of this year, that Joe Biden dropped out of the race. And I went back to my notes from that Monday, July 22nd, 2024. My headline on my own notes was Trump defeats Biden just over 3 months before election, which was true. Trump had defeated Joe so obviously. And this is, I know it is so funny to watch Joe smiling yesterday in the Rose Garden, like, I'm still the only guy who ever beat Trump. I'm the guy to beat Trump. Actually, he defeated you very handily. So handily, you didn't make it to election day. It was so obvious you were going to lose. You dropped out 3 months before the election. Remember, though, it was obvious to all of us that it was Obama world and Pelosi world. It was Democrat establishment world who yanked Biden clean out of the race. The sitting president of the United States, the nominee of his party, the guy with all the votes, they yanked him out of the race. And they said, your time is done. And he kept insisting. He held on for like a month. He kept clinging on. He's like, no, I'm the guy. I'm the only one. I'm the only one who can do it. And Pelosi succeeded in giving him the shiv. She got rid of him. So it was on that Sunday, July 21st at 1:46 in the afternoon that Joe Biden's Twitter account lit up, his X account, and he posted, my fellow Americans, and then he revealed that he was dropping out of the race. But guess what he didn't say at that 1:46 p.m. time? He didn't say, I'm endorsing Kamala Harris. He didn't. The only mention of her, which is in the statement, is I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all of this work. That's it. That's the only reference to her. It wasn't until approximately a half an hour later, at 2:13 p.m., that Joe Biden's X account once again lit up to say the following. He said, it is today I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this. So why wasn't that statement appended to the original announcement? Why didn't Biden both announce that he was dropping out of the race and instead handing it right off to Kamala Harris? He didn't. It came out half an hour later. Now, for most people, you might think, well, that's just a really short window of time. He was dropping out and endorsing her. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. That is not the way these guys think. He would have clearly done it if that was the plan. This was not the plan. The left did not plan on Biden upending an open process that rapidly. Biden jumps in to basically throw a middle finger up to the establishment at that moment. So half an hour later, there's definitely fighting going on behind the scenes. They're trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do. How are they going to get to an open process? And Biden steps in and goes, Kamala can have it. I endorse her. And that started some interesting things because it wasn't too long after that the Clintons came out. Bill and Hillary Clinton, they came out and they too endorsed Kamala Harris. But guess who didn't endorse Kamala right away? Obama. Obama released a statement following all of this, talking about Joe Biden's love of country and we believe Joe Biden has a generous vision and blah, blah, blah. For now, Michelle and I just want to express our love and gratitude to Joe and Jill for leading us so ably and courageously during this perilous times. But Obama did not endorse Kamala right away. He did not. He held off. In fact, he wasn't the only one. Here's the headline from that very weekend from Axios. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, all mum on endorsing Harris after Biden drops out. So what really happened here is Biden, in a fit of rage, endorsed Kamala Harris and blew up the process that they thought they were going to impose on him. Obama world and a subsidiary, Pelosi world, thought that they could handle him. And Biden, he donned a virtual MAGA cap that day. He straight up blew up their own process as they threw him out of the race. He kamikazed them. And so in that way, we say today, Joe, I raise my glass to you. That's the one time. That's it. That's the only one you get. I raise my glass to you for blowing up the establishment's plans as they yanked you out of the race. I don't know. I still have this little thought that the Bidens are very angry about all this and that they were really trying to upend so much of what the left was attempting to accomplish in these last few months, bitter about how it all went down. Jill Biden, she wanted to desperately cling to power. If she loved her husband and she was concerned about him, she would have never let him run for the presidency in the first place. But for her, she wanted the power, so she was trying to hold on to it. When she voted this week, she wore a ruby red outfit. These Democrats, everything they do is virtue signaling. The clothing that they wear is virtue signaling. The women of the United States House of Representatives, the Democrats, showing up to the State of the Union, all wearing white together. They're the innocent ones. They're standing up for women and whatever. You know what I mean? Everything is a statement. Jill wore all red to go vote. Joe Biden putting the MAGA cap on? I don't know. Biden scheduling events at the very same time Kamala is supposed to be holding campaign events and blowing through $1 billion. $1 billion. Gabe Kaminsky had a great piece today for the Washington Examiner talking about this. That So the campaign was left in massive debt. So the Democrats are carrying a huge debt load right now that they're still fundraising for. How do you send that fundraising appeal out? Hey, can you pay off our debts after we lost and we failed to use your money in a good way? Who's going to fall for that? Maybe Democrats will. Maybe Democrat voters will fall for it. I hope they don't, though, for their sake, for the sake of their families. I hope you don't blow cash on paying off Kamala's debts. They spent over $100,000 on the Call Me Daddy podcast. How is that possible? How do you spend six figures to do a podcast? Doesn't even make sense. And it's not for the travel. I'm not talking about that. Not the fuel expenses, the private plane, or anything like that. They built a set for the podcast for over $100,000 paid for by the campaign. Isn't that crazy? It's completely crazy. I mean, it's great. It's great that they were wasting money like this. But the fighting that was going on inside this party is becoming more and more clear. I love these postmortems. I love the look back on how all of this went down. Nancy Pelosi clearly yanked Biden out of this race. I don't know. And again, we to this day, we really don't know how they ultimately did it. Did they threaten the family? What happened that led to this? Because Biden was holding on. And as Biden goes out the door, he sabotages them. He says, all right, Kamala's got the endorsement. She's the girl. That's it. We're going with her. And all those establishment figures, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, they were all left staggered. The Clintons were the only ones who got on board, I guess. That's kind of interesting. I wonder what's going on there. But wild. So that's the news today as Nancy Pelosi, bitter that Joe Biden held on as long as he did. And then when he got out, that he endorsed Kamala Harris. And then she lies, of course, by suggesting, I'm sure Kamala would have done great in the primary. She would have been great. She lies to you, as always. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Marty is calling in from Gainesville now, line 1. Hello, Marty. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Marty.
Comment about that alleged gender gap that never materialized in the election.
Yeah.
Didn't you think it was great that Harris thought she was going to win by getting women to lie to their husbands, and she lost because the women lied to the pollsters?
Well, that's funny. I wonder how many people just didn't talk to the pollsters, too. The phenomenon was that conservative men were like, I'm not talking to you. I don't want to talk to you. That had to have existed among conservative women, too. And when I say conservative, I just mean Trump-supporting people. And so that is a funny thing. But yeah, that was the contempt with which the left held women during the election. That they have no agency, that they're just slaves to their husbands, that their husbands are beating them into submission. And don't you worry, it's a safe place when you go into that ballot box. Your husband will never know. It's so divisive and condescending, Marty.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please.
In this finger pointing, how is it that I can't remember his name. Who's the black congressman that gets a pass on this? He should be blamed for demanding that Harris get the nomination.
Who was it that demanded that he got the nomination? Was it Clyburn?
Yeah, Clyburn. I couldn't think of his name. I haven't heard his name come up in all the finger pointing.
Yeah. Well, no, he's like a saint on the left, so they'll leave him unscathed. Let's not talk about Clyburn, but yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I love all of this though. I think fight amongst yourselves, please, and disappear into the wilderness, into obscurity. The country will thank you for that. Hey, Marty, thank you very much for the call.
Thank you, Vince.
All right. Let's see. Oh, well, more of your calls coming up. All right, let's go to the phones. I've got Glenn calling from Burke now, line 6. Hello, Glenn. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, Vince. First of all, I want to say I know you're probably having the best week of your life, and it's well-deserved.
I don't know if it's the best week of my entire life. It's definitely up there, though. I'm enjoying it, which I like.
Of your broadcasting life.
Sure. Yeah, definitely up there. Yeah, for sure.
My comment is on why Hillary supported Harris right out of the chute. I think she said, Bill, in my lifetime, I'm not going to be the only one female to lose to Trump.
So that's good. This is a good theory. So she knew that Kamala was a stinker. Well, everybody did.
Yeah,
The polling was crystal clear that Kamala was a stinker. And so Hillary's involvement in the race was, I'll endorse Kamala so that yet another woman loses, and my record is not quite so obvious and doesn't stick out quite as much.
Yeah, and my second comment is, after action report by the Democrats, you can look at your candidate, you can look at the voters. They looked at the voters and said, they are screwed up, our candidate was fine. I'm happy they did that, because as long as you do that, you'll never win another election.
Yes, keep that same energy, please. Keep looking at the voters and thinking they're the problem, because that's how you do end up in obscurity, in the wilderness, for a very long time. I really, really hope, because right now it's amazing, Glenn. I've got so much audio that sounds exactly like what you're talking about, which is that the little bit of so-called soul searching that's happening right now on the left all consists of, you know what screwed up? It was the voters. It was actually the voters. They're just too stupid to process all of this. And the only thing, Glenn, that the Democrats will even try to admit to, if they admit any mistake, is like, it was actually a messaging mistake. We just failed to tell them how great we were. These voters just didn't realize how great they were, and they fell for this idea that the economy's in a bad shape and that the border's open and the crime is up. They're just so dumb. So we have to work on our messaging in order to reach the dumb people.
Yeah, and think about all those names they called us. And the whole time Trump is campaigning, they never once said, how do those people keep coming and cheering him? They never wanted to understand us. Ever.
Yeah, and including now, after you served them an epic defeat. Thank you, Glenn.
You bet. Let's have a good weekend.
I'm going to have a great one. I hope you do, too. Yes, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. That guy, Allan Lichtman, you know him? Remember him? The 13 keys to victory. He's never been wrong in 600 years. I've accurately predicted the sunrise down to the second. He's just an unbelievable figure. So arrogant, condescending, just ridiculous human being with a goofy toupee. That guy, he got this election so wrong. And now he's got an explanation for it. I'll play that for you coming up. We've got a lot to get to. Mike Bastasch will join us in a moment. He'll talk about American energy being unleashed and Joe Biden's effort to stop that. Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 3:35, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Senator Tommy Tuberville is here at 4 o'clock as Republicans take over the Senate. But what senator's actually going to run the show? Tommy Tuberville's got some thoughts on that. Julie Kelly will be with us coming up at 4:30. We talked to her about Jack Smith's attempt to get rid of his election meddling operation and quickly get out of town. And Kurt Schlichter joins us at 5 o'clock to spike the football. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Yes, a lot of celebrating this week. But before the Biden administration heads out, they're trying to gum up the works a bit. Here to discuss, Michael Bastasch joins us now. He's a managing editor of the Daily Caller News Foundation, has a long history of covering energy policy as well, which makes him a perfect guest for this topic. Mike, good to have you back with us, sir.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Okay, so here's what I'm reading in the Daily Caller News Foundation today. Lame duck Biden-Harris administration is working to undermine the incoming Trump administration's energy agenda after Kamala's loss. How are they doing this?
Yeah, so it's a little technical, but we'll dive right in. Basically, your viewers or listeners may remember that some time ago, the Biden admin put a ban on new approvals of new natural gas export facilities. And they said they were going to do this they weren't going to lift the freeze until they were able to conduct a study on it. So that study is supposed to come out, and it's expected that it'll be written in such a way that it'll make it more legally problematic for Trump to approve new export terminals, which he's already promised to do once he gets elected. So it's a bureaucratic thing. They're trying to gum up the works. They won't stop it forever, but it's just one of the many landmines they're laying for Trump. whether it's, making it harder to fire bureaucrats, putting new judges in that will be appointed for life, and crafting and pushing new regulations that then Trump will have to unwind. And we see this with every administration. Obama did a lot of midnight regulations before he left that the Trump admin had to take a lot of time to sit there and unwind.
Yes. Yeah, that reminds me of, remember the decision to trans the inmates? That was done as a last-second thing by the Obama administration on the way out the door, that inmates in federal prisons could get transgender operations courtesy of the American taxpayer. So when President Trump gets into office, they made it, they changed the ruling there. They said only if it's medically necessary. It's never medically necessary to hack a human being up. So they didn't do any of these trans surgeries. And then when Biden got back into office, they reverted it again, and then they were doing all the trans surgeries in prisons. And of course, Kamala Harris lied about that during the campaign. But that's an expression, obviously, Mike Bastasch, of how these administrations, especially these Democrats, at the last second, just before they go out the door, they try and create trouble for their successors.
Yeah, and, like I said, the Obama administration really did this, and we can expect the Biden admin to do it too. Of course, Biden was part of the Obama administration and also played a key role in the Russia hoax and all these other things that did even more damage than the regulatory stuff did to Trump. So we're going to see it again. We're going to see resistance within the bureaucracies. There are going to be bureaucrats who slow walk things, just don't do their jobs, and do everything they can to gum up the works. But I do think this time the Trump people expect this. Yeah. They are probably, I think they are preparing for it. And there have been whole books written about people who are probably by people who are coming into the Trump admin, who have written about, David Bernhardt wrote a book called You Report to Me. And it's basically about how to get control of the federal bureaucracy. And I have it on good authority that Trump's read that book and he's a big fan of it. And so we could see things that are in that book being implemented in the federal government in a way to rein in the bureaucracy, get around the bureaucrats that you can't fire, transfer people, do whatever they can to make the government to pass his agenda the most efficient way.
Interesting. That's fascinating. The book, again, You Report to Me by David Bernhardt. Okay, so I hope he can succeed in that. I think I suspect he's going to have a lot more success this go around than he did in 2016. This liquefied natural gas, LNG, this is a product of fracking, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the question I have is, if you cared about the environment, why would you put a pause on exporting liquefied natural gas when fracking is the leading driver of dropping carbon emissions, which, again, the left says they care about?
That's a really good question. And I think at this point, the argument they have is, well, any emissions are bad, even less emissions than coal. They're more obsessed with putting in offshore wind turbines that fail and cause massive pollution on Nantucket Island and stuff, and kill whales and marine life. That's kind of their agenda. That's what they're pushing. They don't really like natural gas. The environmentalists have never liked natural gas. Obama and Biden kind of embraced it as a political expediency to say, oh yeah, we're reducing emissions, but we're also producing more. Meanwhile, their administrations have put up roadblocks at every step to getting more gas out of the ground. And for years, this has been going on for years. And it's not just them, it's Democratic governors doing it. For example, Andrew Cuomo is basically responsible for really damaging Pennsylvania's natural gas industry because he blocked any pipelines from going through New York to New England. And the Biden admin has been using, and the Obama admin did this too. They used the Clean Water Act to block pipelines. It is a mystery why they don't like these things. People can probably surmise maybe a few reasons, but some of the Democratic Party's biggest donors, like Mike Bloomberg, oppose natural gas on all grounds, and they even oppose plastic. They want to see the gas industry destroyed.
Yeah, well, it's a product of corruption. That's the explanation for it. So rather than any environmental consideration. So this, I saw there's a headline today that the EU is now considering replacing Russian LNG, liquefied natural gas, with American natural gas because Donald Trump is coming back into office. This is the piece from Reuters today. The European Union could consider replacing Russian liquefied natural gas imports with those from the United States. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen told reporters on Friday, quote, "We still get a lot of LNG from Russia. Why not replace it with American LNG, which is cheaper for us and brings down our energy prices?" She said the EU approach to trade policies implemented when Donald Trump takes power again as U.S. president in January will be to engage, look at common interests, and negotiate. Mike Bastasch, what do you make of this? The EU now saying, well, maybe we should buy a lot more American natural gas.
You know what's funny, Vince, is like this isn't the first. Trump's like not even president yet. We already have Mexico's already promised to like secure the border. A bunch of migrants are turning back. We have, major, I think the shoe company, Steve Madden, already saying they're going to scale back their production in China earlier than they planned. And now we have Europe saying, oh, well, we'll buy more natural gas from you guys. And it just took him getting elected. So I think that's a really interesting thing that's happening.
Yes.
It's amazing the thing is Europe could have done this at any point, and they're only doing it now because Trump they think it'll soften Trump up for when he comes into, when it comes to trade negotiations or possibly NATO negotiations, and it won't. He's a businessman.
But I like this. This is the way to butter him up. If you enrich Americans and you pump money into our economy to the benefit of American communities, that's precisely the way I want you buttering up the president of the United States.
No, that's exactly right. And the truth is Europe really needs cheap energy. I saw something yesterday in the Financial Times. The UK, Germany, European countries, Italy have the most expensive electricity prices in the world. They're like 2 or 3 times what we pay here. So they need cheap gas more than anyone. And if they can get it not from Russia and from us, well, all the better.
Well, but that's why it's been so insane. They've been buying it from Russia. So you're telling me the EU has been funding Russia's war against Ukraine while demanding American intervention to fight Russia?
Yep.
And this was, as you pointed out, this could have been on the table the whole time. Europe could have been dumping money into the United States in order to buy liquefied natural gas from us, and wasn't. And why wasn't the Biden administration out front saying we're going to increase LNG exports to Europe so they don't have to give the Russian war machine money?
They could have, but they didn't. It's interesting how during Biden's presidency, Iran and Russia saw their profits from selling oil and gas skyrocket. I think you see a trend there. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, Vince, but when energy prices were high, at one point the Biden admin was considering loosening sanctions on Venezuela in order to help get prices down. I mean,
yep,
they will do anything. They will do anything to keep prices low except unleash American energy.
Finally, on the issue of American energy, one of the details of it that I've talked about with you before that I don't think a lot of people realize. Sometimes the Biden administration would push back on criticism that it was opposed to fossil fuels, saying that, oh, no, we the highest oil production ever under Joe Biden. We're not an enemy to oil. But the reality of that is those wells take 5 years to come online. In other words, the wells that are productive now, they started during the Trump era. Is that going to continue to be the case? I mean, when Trump comes back into office, what kind of ramp up time is going to be necessary to increase all of this energy production?
Yeah, the lead time on some of these wells and also mining is years. There is talk of permitting reform to make these projects go faster. And Trump could open up a lot more lands and increase and get faster permit approvals. But I just saw something today. It was the Biden admin leased 95% fewer acres than the Trump administration did on federal lands. So he is facing, well, America, I don't think Americans realize it, but we are facing some troubling times ahead unless we turn things around. And then there's the electric grid, which is a whole other disaster that we're kind of sleepwalking into in a lot of ways.
Yes.
But I think that Trump, to his credit, does have a plan for the electric grid. He has promised to lease more lands for oil and gas drilling and reverse a lot of the stuff that Biden's done. Thankfully, right now, a lot of our production and the most productive production is on state and private lands, which Biden can't control. And the states have been good stewards of that and leasing as much as possible.
State and private lands. So to the extent that he's taking credit for it, it hasn't even been in his control. Amazing. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Mike Bastasch from the Daily Caller News Foundation. Thank you, as always. Great to talk to you. Yeah, that guy Allan Lichtman has been insisting for some time. He's like, Kamala's going to win this thing. Kamala's going to win this thing. I'm an historian. I call all the elections correctly. I know everything about everything. And then he would mock people who said that he was wrong. In fact, Lichtman is such a goofball. Let's see here. I've got the audio for you. Lichtman said very recently, it was a matter of just days ago, that it's a guarantee that Kamala is going to win this thing, and it doesn't matter what happens during the campaign. It's all about the 13 keys. Take a listen to this guy.
My prediction deliberately on September 5th, before the Harris-Trump debate that all the pundits saying was going to be so pivotal in deciding the election, because the big message of my system, the keys to the White House, is that it's governing, not campaigning, that counts. And the keys gauge the strength and performance of the White House party. And I have not changed my prediction of a Kamala Harris win, despite all the vicissitudes of the campaign, which have gone in both directions. Let's not forget, Harris whipped him badly in the debate. And that didn't seem to move anyone or anything. But my prediction still stands, and I have a 40-year track record behind it.
A 40-year track record. So he's so insistent. He's like, it's going to come true. I don't care what anybody says. And now he's assessing what went wrong. You know what went wrong? The voters.
I think two things this year and maybe going forward broke this premise of a rational, pragmatic electorate.
It's the electorate.
And these are trends that are not new, but have exploded this year beyond anything we've ever seen before. First is disinformation. Always had disinformation.
Oh, boy.
But we've never had anything remotely on this scale. We're billionaires. And I don't know how much Elon Musk is worth.
I'm sure
the
more
billionaires. Than $100 billion.
One billionaire.
Who control.
Two if you count Trump.
Critical sources of information for the electorate. I mean, Elon Musk owns X.
Yeah, forget Bezos.
And I've seen reports.
And Michael Bloomberg.
That his disinformation that he's put out has been viewed by 2 billion viewers.
He's angry about that.
Vastly more influential than the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN.
Well, then why wasn't that one of your keys?
CBS. Tremendous and it's not unique to him. Billionaires are putting this out all over the place. And it's not just what people feel about the economy, for example, on disinformation. It's tremendous disinformation that they've come to believe.
Yeah, it's the propaganda you see. And then there's the xenophobia, he says, and it's the bigotry and the fear of foreign influences. It's you. You're the problem. His prediction would have come true if it weren't for those stupid voters. Tommy Tuberville, Senator from Alabama, joins us next to talk about the new leadership in the United States Senate. Who's it going to be? We'll ask Coach Tuberville.